Well, welcome everybody to tonight's event of TiE South Coast. Please continue eating if you haven't finished your meal. I'll take a few minutes here just to speak about a chapter in our events, and then we'll bring the panel up and begin this evening's talk on green tech. Just by a show of hands, who's been here? This is their first night here at a TiE event. Okay, so a few people. So I'll touch just briefly here on kind of the TiE history. TiE was formed in 1992 by a group of entrepreneurs in the Silicon Valley area who were of Indus descent. The Indus River is a river that runs through India and Pakistan. So you'll see that culture of the organization, there are those Indus roots. In other chapters that you might visit, you also see that still here in the food that we serve. TiE South Coast is one of 56 chapters within TiE Global. There are about 12,500 members, about 2,500 charter members, and those are the individuals, really by invitation only, who mentor young entrepreneurs and work behind the scenes to manage the organization. TiE is in 13 countries. As well. And TiE South Coast actually is comprised of a chapter here in San Diego as well as one in Orange County. So if you go to our website, you see their events as well, which you can attend. In fact, there's one coming up this week on the 28th, which is, I should have taken some notes here before I got up, but the IT czar for the Obama administration is speaking at that event. I believe his last name is
Anish Chopra.
Anish Chopra. There we go. So I couldn't use his first name, or I was going to say Anil. He spoke at our 10th anniversary gala at the Hotel Dell about 2 years ago. And very knowledgeable individual. Of course, he reports directly to President Obama. So attending that event, I'm sure you'll learn a lot about his projects and his effort to push information and technology, or actually push information out, and really leave it to individual companies to just be inventive and entrepreneurial and come up with ways to use that and come up with different applications. So we said this, remember his talk 2 years ago, it's how they're just pushing out data, making data available for people to take and implement in various ways. It was a neat talk, and it's certainly something I think we'd all like to see. So 1992, TiE formed, and our chapter here has been here now for 12 years. The monthly events are one part of the program. Another program we have is TiE Young Entrepreneurs. So this is a business plan competition for high school students that just, our local competition just finished. Now the winning team for a local competition will be flying out to Atlanta to compete globally. So teams will be flying in from Atlanta, from the UK, and there'll be 2 or 3 chapters from India. But again, it is a global competition. The grand prize here is $15,000 and $10,000 pro bono services. So it's a neat competition. We're very proud to bring it. It just shows you what kind of a small community we have here. So one of the judges, an individual by the name of Suren Dutia, was again a judge for TiE, and one of the students came up with an interesting technology to one of the student teams. Some various ways to recharge cell phones, using solar technology and actually fluid moving within the phone itself. One of the panelists tonight, Chuck Copen, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Copen, he actually, Suren Dutia had met with his company about his technology, and so Suren was actually very knowledgeable when the students presented and said, wait, I know a lot about this. And actually was able to speak to their technology, their presentation, judge it quite well. So Chuck is again here tonight and one of the panelists. I thought that was kind of neat with the small community we have here. Let me talk about our next event, which is on your table in front of you here. I hope you can make it. It is the San Diego Incubator supporting company formation and development. You'll see that sheet in front of you, and I think in the overview it's pretty clear. But San Diego, certainly America, recognizes that entrepreneurship, building those institutions that foster it and help it just develop is kind of critical to not only San Diego's success, but America's success. And so I think if you I think you would all enjoy coming to hear these fine panelists and the information they'll share. I think Incubators is unique. If you haven't learned about who they are, what they do, I encourage you to come down to our next event and hear that presentation. Those panelists speak to that. The last thing I'll mention here is our sponsors. Hayden Trubit is here with Stradley Yoka, one of our sponsors. We have some. Thank you, Hayden. Appreciate your support. Without our sponsors, of course, we'd be able to bring these events to you tonight. We have many others. Qualcomm is another, as well as several media companies. But I'll keep this brief and stick just with the one who's here tonight. And that's Hayden. Thanks, Hayden. We appreciate your support. Now, with all that said, I'd like to bring up the individual who was really responsible for putting the events together, at least certainly the last few we've had and tonight's as well. Mark Leibowitz is on our executive committee. Again, works behind the scenes to put these events together and the logistics of the organization. But Mark, if you wouldn't mind coming up and introducing the panelists tonight.
Welcome everyone. As some of you may know, every year around Earth Day, TiE has aimed to do a green technology event focusing on renewable resources in some way. So this evening, I think we have a very, very interesting panel. And if the panel could come up, I'm just going to really, really briefly introduce them and then turn it over to Holly, who's going to moderate. So on the panel tonight, we have Nigel Mealy. Nigel is a scientist by training. He's currently a partner and chief strategy officer at Seneki Clean Tech. He's also the CEO of Energy. Michael Hurst is founder, president, and CEO of Chlorophyll, a renewable building materials company. Chuck Copeland is the CEO of Renew It, which is a company that is focused on solar charging for cell phones and lights in the developing world. Eddie Fennecool is the director of IT and marketing at Eco Rebox, which is a very interesting company that has quite intriguing technology and patents associated with packaging and shipping. And the event tonight is going to be moderated by Holly Garrett. Holly, many of you may know, she's been around San Diego for a number of years in numerous roles at Connect and in the clean tech arena. She is the founder and CEO of Clean Energy Principles, and her background comes out of actually the oil and energy industry before moving to clean tech. So with that said, please welcome the panel, and please feel free to interact and ask your questions and learn from them.
Well, good evening. I'm very pleased to be here for a number of reasons. One, I always feel that the TiE organization, this organization's always offered very valuable and beneficial information to entrepreneurs. And it's always been a very good networking event. And most importantly, because I don't get to eat Indian food very often, I think that's a benefit for me, is coming and eating. Actually, I think it's good Indian food. So thank you for having me, and thank you for inviting me here. Opportunities, we are here to discuss. And we're not just discussing any opportunities. It's green opportunities. And you might ask, well, what are green opportunities? Well, in my world, that really kind of depends on who you ask. But tonight, we're not going to worry about it. Tonight, we're going to talk about technology, new technology, business models, new business models that offer competitive returns to investors and solutions to our ecological challenges. We want these technologies to have superior performance But of course, we want them to have a lower cost. We want to reduce or even eliminate our environmental footprint. And lastly, it's very, very important that we use our natural resources very, very carefully. And coming from the oil industry, I will include petroleum in that. So TiE members and guests, we are here tonight as entrepreneurs, investors, community leaders, service providers, executives, to learn what we can do to seize these opportunities and be successful in the movement, in this emerging movement. Now, I use the word movement very carefully because for me, it's very difficult to put green tech or clean tech in any one category. The construction industry. Construction is an industry. Healthcare is an industry. Transportation is an industry. No matter what industry you work in, there's always an opportunity to have superior performance and perhaps lower cost. There's always an opportunity to reduce or eliminate our environmental impact. And there's always opportunities to use our natural resources very, very carefully. Now let me stop there. In my world, I use the word clean tech. We are here to discuss green tech. Tonight, it's not going to matter. If I say clean tech, I want you to hear green. And maybe in the future, we'll debate the difference between clean and green. So let's just make that clear. So let's begin our discussion. Mark introduced the panelists a little bit, and I'm not going to bore you with more longer bios. We're going to get to know them just through discussion and hopefully through a lot of interactions from you guys. So I want to start with Nigel. Nigel, you have a very extensive background in pharmaceuticals and biotech, life science. You come from the UK. You have run companies, led teams. You have experience in China. Tell us about that one moment when you decided that you could take your knowledge and apply that to biofuels.
Well, that's a complex question, and indeed, it wasn't exactly one moment. My interest in the fuel sector goes right the way back to the first oil crisis, which occurred in, I guess it's 1973. And I'm kind of giving you a little bit about my age away, of course, by telling you that. I was 2 at the time. Anyway, it goes right the way back to 1973, and I saw a documentary about a guy called Melvin Calvin. Melvin Calvin was professor at UC Berkeley at the time, and actually had done a lot of pioneering work in algae in the 50s, interestingly enough, but spent all of his spare time wandering the earth looking for plants that produced hydrocarbon-like materials. And this interest began primarily from plants of the Hevea genus, which of course is better known as the rubber tree. And so I was fascinated by the fact that this guy was wandering around finding plants that could produce oil, hydrocarbon-like materials. Some of them grew in the desert, etc., etc. Now, that first wave of interest stayed with me for a long time. And in the intervening years, I worked in biotech companies and pharmaceutical companies, and you know, did a lot of things that biotechs and pharmaceuticals do. I also worked for Stenomics at one time, and that's, of course, in the food business, the flavor business. So I've seen all of that. So to say that there was some single event that suddenly convinced me that biofuels were interesting really goes right the way back to 1973.
Thank you, Nigel. Now, let me follow that up with just a small question. Your education, is it medicinal chemistry?
Oh, I'm trained as a chemist, by the way. I did a PhD on prostaglandin synthesis, which is essentially the synthesis of molecules that are of interest to the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay, thank you. Now, Michael, I want to ask you a similar question. You come from an engineering background, and you are a veteran of the life science industry as well. You have experience with instrumentation, analysis, things like that. What problems did you see, or what did you observe, and what really made you want to go out and start your own company and tackle that problem?
Sorry. Sometimes I'm not quite sure if I understand that myself, because it's not for the faint of heart. But I was doing a lot of work in Asia, primarily in China, Japan, and India. And yeah, after supporting the fight against cancer and other disease for many years, just by building all these crazy machines for drug discovery, I realized that, or in just doing some reading, I learned that off-gassing of formaldehyde from our common office furniture and building materials occurs for 6 to 10 years. And, you know, this stuff is ubiquitous. So, you know, all these tables are probably laminated particle board. And a lot of our office furniture is as well. So I wanted to, my first idea was to come up with green office furniture. And I knew the first thing I would have to do is come up with a green substrate to replace particle board. I quickly realized that I don't know anything about furniture, but I did know that I could scale down the business model and then become the Intel Inside company to the furniture manufacturers. And since the substrate that we came up with was actually attractive, I would have a broader audience to include interior design, you know, construction, and architecture.
Excellent, thank you. Now, the reason I ask these questions right at the beginning is because a lot of times people want to talk to me about getting into the clean tech or green tech industry. And I wanted to really demonstrate that regardless of your skills or your knowledge, there's almost always opportunities that if you see a problem, you can transition and do something that's green, something that's better for the environment. So all you guys out there that want to get into renewable energies or something environmentally friendly, there you can do that. You just got to find that one thing you want to do. And I'd actually like to ask the audience, is there anyone here that would like to get into the green tech or clean tech, but they're really not sure if they have the skills? We have high tech, we have software executives and people. I don't know, what do you guys think? Is there anyone here that would like to get into clean tech or the green industry?
Sure.
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 Why? Someone tell me why. How about, yeah.
I think it's inspirational. I think it's great to be able to feel good about what you're doing, what you're working on. I don't know. I've worked for large OEMs for most of my career, and you just get wrapped up in, you know, earning a salary and going to work every day. And I think it's. I don't want to make this sound too. But I think it's inspirational to work on something that has a future. You know, maybe just from a crass economic standpoint, there's growth opportunity, nothing else. So that's my
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
Actually, I mean, I'd like to be able to worry about this from the start, from the design process, as opposed to, because I work with an association of vendors, and they're always worrying about how to dispose of stuff or what they didn't think of, all these, they agonize about regulation and ROHAS and other things. So I'd like to be involved in something, again, inspirational and making a difference. You know? And frankly, living up to the expectations of our children, really.
Absolutely, thank you.
Only let me tie it. What
Absolutely,
Michael was
Chuck.
saying is, but I got into it from a base business
Yeah.
problem.
Sure.
So what I was doing is working in China, bringing products into the U.S. for U.S. brands. And one of our customers happened to be Vodafone. And 3 years ago, there was a strategic summit in Hong Kong, and Vodafone said, look, we've got, our biggest problem is most of our growth is going to come out of the developing world, and there's no power.
Good point.
And asked our company, our design manufacturing company, to design a mobile phone with a solar panel on it. We said, okay, we can do that, but it's not a very good idea, because nobody wants to set their phone outside all day. You can't charge it, use it, charge it. When you tell the customer that, you don't get hired off it. So, but what happened then is, back to your point about inspiration, what happened then is on our own, my partner and I went to Africa, India, these developing countries, and tried to figure out what people do need in terms of phone. Once you understand about off-grid, there's 4 billion people out there that live with a lack of power, 1.6 billion completely off the grid. Of those 1.6 billion, there's 800 million children that don't have lights to read at night, and 550 million people that own a mobile phone. So that's how we got hooked into the business, and that became mobile solar chargers, so handheld, because there's no distribution systems. And in these developing countries, there's not going to be. That's a whole energy discussion.
Right, and you're taking away from future questions,
Yeah.
so.
So,
Hold you there.
but the point is, it's clean technology enables that.
Exactly.
And it's a business problem that got us involved in clean tech versus wanting to be in clean tech.
Well,
it was a solution to a base business problem
Either
for a
way,
big
it works.
industry.
So really what we're talking about is social responsibility. It's really time for a lot of us to step up and say, we need to do the things that are right. Now, we still have to make, in my introduction, competitive returns for investors. But I think if we really look at this and look at it wisely, we can do this and still make profits on this. Now let me transition into a different subject. I want to set up the industry overview. And in my introduction, I didn't use the word industry purposely, but I'm going to use it now. And I want to ask Chuck, you just mentioned that you were in several different countries, and if you could repeat those for us. And you just mentioned the diversity and experience. Tell us a bit more about getting into those countries and the growth and the reason why you really see that as a market.
Well, and for us, we call the business 2 guys in 5 continents. My partner's in London, I'm here in Southern California. Our office is in Hong Kong, and we sell in South Asia and Africa. So it's a global reach from that perspective. And the reason that we're focused on the developing world is because of the grid, there's a lack of energy in that part of the world. But in order to help people in that part of the world, you have to give them access to technology so they can help themselves, and power is a key driver of that, whether it's with mobile phones or lights. So that's how we do it. Our biggest challenge, because we've got, we use PV, we use lithium-ion batteries, those costs have come down. So we can, from a manufacturing perspective in southern China, we can get efficient, reliable solutions to put into the marketplace. As a business, our biggest challenge is distribution. So when we're talking about Indonesia, for instance, there's 150 million people in Indonesia that have cell coverage with no power. How do you get the not only the phones out there, but how do you get charging to them? That's our biggest challenge. And, when we're talking about sub-Saharan Africa, there's 900 million people in sub-Saharan Africa. There's 23 countries. So what we're faced with is the distribution, the government issues, the payment issues. It goes, all the way through the parts of the world that we're dealing with. So there are more base business problems for us is distribution. And then the product, the product we've got solved, it's the distribution is our challenge. But we're operating right now we're distributing in 12 countries in Africa. We're in Indonesia and we're in India. So we've got, we're working on that, but it just takes a long time. There's a reason, as we were telling earlier, there's a reason these countries are underdeveloped. It's hard to do business in them.
Now, I want to know, will your phones work with May gray and June gloom?
Well, and again, that's part of the issue, right? Sub-Saharan Africa, you don't have that, but you've got the monsoons in India. Right? Those are issues. But if you live without power, you have patience.
Really? Okay. So what's your point? No, never mind. So, Michael, I want to move to you. Chlorophyll develops environmentally responsible building materials. And when I think of the building industry, I think of really tough times. However, with regulations and a lot of the government doing more to make green buildings come along, perhaps that's in your favor. Tell us a little bit about the industry you're working in and what are you doing to enter into that market?
Sure. The construction industry, the wheels of change turn very slowly. When things are going like gangbusters, they have no incentive to change. Now, with housing starts, as we all know, in the dumps, the builders that are still in business are looking for an edge against their competitors, and we can provide that. And also leveraging these new policies like AB 32, which is now sticking around here in California. There's a federal measure which comes online next January, which also makes it very tough for manufacturers to have formaldehyde-based products, or formaldehyde emissions from their products. So since we're starting our business with these things already ingrained in our DNA, we don't have to change. We don't have to incur any large expense as a reactive condition to the legislation that's been passed.
Excellent. Now, is it difficult when you approach a customer to get them to understand what you're doing, or do they like the idea and they just kind of back off? What is their reaction to your product when you approach them?
So our story has sort of evolved. And when I first started the company, as I was mentioning earlier, my focus was cleaning up our indoor airspace, getting rid of the formaldehyde emissions. Since then, it's gotten a lot better. I mean, it just built on itself. Since we're not contributing to deforestation, we're using an agricultural waste product as our raw material, which in many cases gets burned, which is the case in China, where I first started my research, and then also in many parts of India, they just burn the stuff. So customers are really responsive to, I mean, they really like that message. We're not contributing to deforestation. We're not polluting your indoor airspace. And also, after traveling all over the world with this project, we're going to be manufacturing here in the United States. So what we did was quite backwards, actually. I outsourced our initial R&D to China, not manufacturing, and I own that information that I brought back here to create green jobs.
Excellent, excellent. Now, and the product you're using, you said it's waste, but it's actually, it's not switchgrass,
It's sorghum.
sorghum, yes.
Tall, skinny,
Yeah, so
green
it's
crop.
truly a waste product that you're doing something useful for. And that would typically be burned, and that emits carbon dioxide, right?
Right, so we're keeping this black carbon from entering the atmosphere, and sometimes it's not burned, sometimes it goes into a landfill or something like that, but whatever case, it's a low-value product, and no matter where it grows in the world, it's known as a poor man's crop. So we'll eventually expand into other areas where we can take advantage of cheap labor.
Great. So we're taking a resource and doing something useful for it. Excellent.
Can I ask where in the United States you make it?
We'll be manufacturing in Missouri, initially. We're never going to be a large warehouser type of operation, but we'll replicate this model in other fiber growing regions.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. Now, I wanted to come back to you, Nigel. You wear a couple of different hats, and one of them is the CSO of Synergy. Did I say that right? Synergy Clean Tech. And you're focused on the China market. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing there.
Yeah, I think Synergy is a partnership. There are 4 people in it. I'm one of them, 2 individuals of Chinese origin and a chemical engineer. China's kind of an interesting place, as many of you may know. And Chinese government sometimes, one hand of Chinese government doesn't really know what the other hand's doing. And so recently Chinese government put in place some mandates to blend ethanol with gasoline, not for renewable energy purposes, but for pollution control purposes, just the same way as here in California, gasoline contains, 10, 11% ethanol. In China, a few years ago, a previous mandate had been passed which said no one can convert grains and crops into alcohol. And so there is no internal supply of ethanol that's credible to fill this blending mandate. So people in China, of course, they make beer and wine and strong alcohol for consumption, but that's not in the volumes that are required for blending with gasoline. And so this represents an opportunity. And so what Synergy is doing is we have an angle on some conversion of cellulose into its constituent sugars that can then be fermented into alcohol. And that angle is based on a traditional process, not an enzymatic process. And so we're intending to take that to China and hopefully get some funding to transition that from lab scale into full industrial production. And so that's what we're doing in China.
Thank you, Nigel.
Just to make another comment about that, I spent some time in China doing business myself, and I also spent a year in Beijing a few years ago. And I learned, in fact, that if you want to get money from Chinese investors, then typically you need to look the part. In other words, Chinese investors don't give people like me money, but they will give to individuals of Chinese origin money, and that's part of the Synergy team.
Very interesting. Now, I want to ask a follow-up question. You used the word cellulose. Can you elaborate? Tell us a little bit about what exactly.
Well, the world of cellulose, of course, ranges from Michael's building materials through to a whole range of waste products. And the cellulose that we're targeting is actually solid municipal waste streams, which contain about 70% cellulosic material as a mix of vegetable materials, cardboards, papers, that kind of stuff.
Excellent. And just as a side note, the molecule of cellulose is really made up of a lot of carbons and hydrogens and oxygens, and that's essentially what ethanol is: carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens. So we just need to figure out a way to rearrange that and make ethanol from it. So all you chemists and engineers out there, figure out a way and we'll all be rich. And
another way to view cellulose is that it's a string of sugar molecules attached together.
Now, Nigel, you also mentioned that there's no internal supply of ethanol. Are they importing, is China importing ethanol? Or
Well, the mandate to blend, I think it kicks in either next year or the year after. So the mandate to blend has not happened yet. They do have a couple of chemical plants that convert ethylene into ethanol by a large-scale chemical process, but that in itself is not sufficient to fill the gap.
Okay, excellent. Now, the reason why I wanted to ask these questions is because we've covered the UK, China, Asia, Africa, Indonesia, the US. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. We need to look beyond Southern California and say, yeah, if we know what's going on, if we know what the needs are beyond our even US needs, we can tackle a lot, we can really have a lot of opportunities within the green and clean industry. Are there any audience questions on this subject? Or any questions at all? Yeah, right up front, Lou. I'm sorry?
Who's this guy on the end?
Oh, I'll get to him. He has some special questions.
I don't mean to rush you.
No, he has some
I
special
didn't want him to be
questions.
left out.
David, please.
I want to ask Michael, is Missouri a lesser developed country?
Have you been to Missouri recently?
Actually, there's a lot that California can learn from Missouri. I found a very welcoming community that is interested in investing and creating jobs in their area. So it was an ideal place for us. They need us as badly as we need them.
Michael, did you look at any other states before you chose Missouri?
I've been all over.
Okay.
Yeah, I initially wanted to manufacture in Imperial Valley.
Sure.
It's got the highest unemployment rate in the nation. It's got a perfect climate for the crop that we need. I just couldn't find the funding that was necessary to start producing in Imperial Valley. But I'll probably come back there after we get started in Missouri.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any questions before I go on? No? Okay. Now, I'm going to ask Eddie on the end of the question.
Poor Eddie.
Eddie, a lot of times the definition of green tech includes something about natural resources. I mentioned in my introduction about really using natural resources wisely. Briefly tell us a little bit about what Eco Reeboks is doing and what your market potential looks like.
Eco Reeboks is we do a lot of things, but primarily it's manufacturing boxes, plastic boxes for sustainability. By sustainability, I mean we sell these boxes that are going to be reused again and again in place of cardboard. And the other wing of the company does is actually a patent process that is how we actually utilize those boxes and how we reclaim those boxes at the end of the life. So that's, in a nutshell, that's.
So what would be your ideal customer?
Our ideal customers, anybody who's going to be using a product or to sell a product and they're going to reuse the box over and over again, like warranty companies or those guys will be using our product hopefully and use it in place of cardboard. And our patent process is where we take that box back and we're looking to recycle those boxes in any capacity. We use virgin cardboard or virgin polypropylene, which is plastics, in place of that cardboard. So any customers that do high volume shipping is where we're targeting.
Okay, a couple of days ago when we spoke, you mentioned UPS and FedEx.
Right. A lot of big companies right now have a mandate to be more sustainable. So we're talking with UPS, FedEx, and HP right now, the post office.
Magda has a burning question.
His question.
Yes.
Are any of your boxes temperature sensitive so that can you ship things that need to be kept cool?
Yes, we actually have another product that's like a cold pack to go along with our product that we ship, we can ship things overnight or anything that needs to be there the next day. Yes, sir.
If you have had to put a lot of effort into educating and your customers to change their process of packaging and doing things, because mostly having worked retail a long, long time ago, we just tear things up and throw them out.
Yeah, that's a big hurdle is to change the mindset of a lot of our customers who want to use that cardboard. They have that supply chain already. Cardboard is cheap, readily accessible, where our product is a little more expensive, but you get a lot more use out of it. So it's definitely a hurdle. Nobody really wants to switch. They want to switch, but they don't know when they're going to do it or how they're going to do it, and they want us to really do it for them. Sorry?
You've been involved in re-engineering their process.
Yeah, that's why we're developing software right now to help customers integrate better with their own systems.
So is your so is your system cheaper than like a Is your system cheaper than like a styrofoam box? I have a reason I'm asking. So I get something shipped to me every month. It's a medicine, and I keep asking the Walgreens pharmacy and the company, can you take this back? Can you reuse it? And they keep telling me no. Is it an expense? Because they have to. I mean, I have to throw it out, and I feel awful about it. And
I'm not sure how they do things, but for our product, we encourage the recycling.
Would it be more cost effective than the styrofoam box that I get in the cardboard box with all the cooling stuff in it?
Probably for the shipping side, it's more cost effective in the long run, but I'm not sure how. You return it to Walgreens, right?
I did.
Or you would return the product to Walgreens.
Because my medicine costs $20,000 a year. And I suspect a big chunk of it is just the shipping. Styrofoam and cardboard boxes that they don't want me to return. And, if there was a more cost-effective solution, I'd like to get back to them and say, hey, go back to my insurance companies. Can you figure out how to lower the cost of my medicine if we use your product?
I think it's a possibility.
Could I have to have it shot into me?
If I could add a comment to your desire to recycle styrofoam boxes, there's a trash company in San Diego called Edco who collect about half of the municipal trash in this region. They operate a recycling plant. In fact, they operate several recycling plants. So every time you throw a styrofoam product out, it goes into Edco's recycling plants, is separated, compacted, put in a container and shipped to China, where it's reprocessed into all sorts of domestic products like picture frames or whatever. So your styrofoam box that you throw away may not be being used for its original purpose, but it is actually being recycled in the San Diego area.
And that's fine, but I think I could save myself some money and my insurance company save some money if Eco Reeboks was to provide them a product that's more cost effective, and the whole logistics process would be made more cost effective. It could save everybody on this whole process of shipping this stuff from the get-go.
Yeah, I think we're kind of preaching to the choir here. It's convincing everyone else to do this. Yes, there's a question.
So this line of questioning comes up with, you said about, patents and process. Is there some time motion study that you have done, provided, maybe, to that supplier that Magda talked about, or FedEx or whatever, that would say, don't use box cutters, but here's a way to open it easy so that they, in Costco, for example, I bring home 6 boxes every time. If their process was understood to save them money and time, I mean, do we have to, this comes back to the industry. because you're not the only, and you mentioned other companies, do we have to educate in order for green, clean to be accepted?
Absolutely, and I'll just do a small little plug for my company. Education, in my opinion, is a huge component of all this. And everyone here in this room, we're here because we're interested in it and we want to learn more. But there's a lot of people out there that have to deal with this every single day. The financial providers, the investors, the accountants, the attorneys. There's a lot of people that have to deal with this, and if you just knew a little bit more, just a really good foundation of knowledge, maybe those decision makers might make a better decision. And I always tell people when they ask me about my oil background, I tell them to read the book The Prize by Daniel Yergin. And it's a history, it's a huge book, 800 pages long, about the whole oil industry. And it's packed with information. And I can see parallels from the oil industry to the renewable and alternative energy industry. And I don't want those parallels to actually happen because a lot of them weren't all that great. You know, at the beginning of the oil industry, there were a lot of mistakes made and a lot of things wasted. Let's not do the same thing. Let's try to educate absolutely everyone we possibly can.
Yeah, I guess I want to kind of build on that. The consumer is a huge part of this value delivery system. I mean, Michael can provide building materials that work with existing construction techniques, I assume. So it's a pretty easy sell. You know, Chuck, you're something to recharge a cell phone. If it requires significant change on the part of the consumer, that's going to limit its acceptance. You know, and Eddie, I think the same thing goes with packaging. That if we're asking the consumer to do something different, to open the package in a different way so that it can be reused, you know, again, they become a key part of the delivery system. And so I think there's a huge difference here in how these things are going to be accepted, depending on how the end user of the technology is participating or not participating in the process. You can present a fantastic new technology, but if the end user isn't, you know, buying in, essentially, if they're not, you know, if they have to make significant changes to their behavior, then that's going to limit the acceptance of the technology.
I mean, the same is true for, excuse me, but the same is true for business, because we just talked about, you know, changing a distribution system, right? That there's a gating factor of a company, whether it's Walgreens, that have got, you know, 5,000 stores, right? Heavily regulated industry in pharma, and have got an existing footprint, and getting them to change. Although, just as a personal observation from being in the industry, there is more and more and more emphasis from the shareholders on down for sustainability, right? So there's that value propositions changing a little bit where sustainability becomes first choice versus has to do. So there is a shift out there, and this goes back to your global green technology discussion. There is a shift out there, think sustainability first, and then those things will start to happen. But you're right in consumer acceptance, but business acceptance is the same issue.
And there's going to be a significant segment of both the consumer population and the business population that are going to buy into that proposition. And but if it involves inconvenience or higher cost, it's going to limit its acceptance.
Yeah, but I as a consumer would say, if you give me a box that, you know, saves the environment, and, you know, because I see the cost. I see this as a cost, and I've called them, and, you know, I've complained about this. You know, I'll send it back to you. I would be willing to send this thing back just so that they would use the same box for me every time. And they're like, no.
I wish we had more customers like you.
And I mean, I'm going to send this last box I got, I'm going to send it back with a letter and saying, ship me my stuff back in this box.
Yeah, Kyle and I were talking about this earlier, coming up, you know, when we were networking out there. There's a whole generation of people coming up that default to the sustainability, and that's going to change. I mean, you know, the people that have been doing things the same way and are trying to protect whatever legacies they have, they're going to start to lose that. They're going to start to lose ground and younger people coming in, making decisions, or consumers, right? Is my parents wouldn't go from one store to the next because it's green. I would, and my children are definitely going to. So, again, it's the new environment.
Absolutely. And before I get to David, I want to add a comment to that. You can see our generation and our kids as the transition generation, and hopefully those grandkids or something like that will be the ones that actually figure out that new supply chain and that new internal process. David.
Yeah, what Magda's talking about is very similar to Hewlett-Packard and the printer cartridges. They make it very simple for the consumer to send back the cartridge. They give you the UPS shipping label in the box and everything. You just send it back, and Abbott needs to do the same thing with their Humira, That's what Magda's talking about. Anyway, we can move on to
It's
something
interesting
else,
you bring that up because today I bought a printer for my laser, or toner for my laser printer, and it cost me $360 for the black and 3 colors. And I looked at it and said, I could buy a new printer for this. Now, how sustainable is that versus buying printer or toner versus a new printer? Is that the best use of natural resources? I gotta say no. So, but I haven't done the math. Any other questions or comments?
Just a comment for Eddie, and I want to be on that patent. Today, if you looked at the Google page, zippers, and we were talking about cutting boxes or whatever else. I mean, zippers cost nothing, right? So, I mean, if there was some reliable zipper, maybe you can do. Maybe we can have a use case then.
There you go. Are you doing a patent with me now?
Yes.
Yeah, great new patents.
I made it public first.
We kind of touched on my next question, and I want to ask Michael and Eddie the same question. It's very hard to get these customers to switch what they're doing. Have you found anything at all that works?
Go ahead. Well, I think the easiest way for us to get them to change is to first reassure them that they can use the same tools that they've always been using for other materials. So there's no pain in switching. But more importantly, we can compete on price and quality at the same time. In fact, we can produce a panel here in the United States cheaper than it costs our competitors to ship their product over from China. So we're at this unique point in our history that makes that possible.
Excellent. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, our problem is a lot bigger problem because we have a product that it's plastic, so already inherently not a good thing, and cardboard is so much cheaper. How are we going to compete with that? So, I mean, what we did was we went through and did we're still in a patent process, but we're getting a patent for a methodology of how we're going to get these boxes back. You mentioned Walgreens. We were actually looking at Walmart as a partner to claim to get these boxes back to us somehow, to put them back in recycling or reuse kind of loop. We call it a closed loop system. I mean, it's really hard to do it so to get people on board because there's not enough education out there for people to know how to do it first of all, and to get a company to say, hey, oh yeah, we'll take that box back and we'll ship it to you. The barriers cost, so it's very costly for us to ship things back and forth. So we're looking to tie into existing supply chain and existing transportation systems.
Thank you. Any other comments from the panel on that? Now, I want to move into some business model questions. When we talk about sustainability, typically in my world, sustainability has 2 definitions. One is my company going to be around tomorrow, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? And then to some people, they use sustainability as what's the company actually doing to reduce their environmental footprint, to make sure they're doing social responsible actions. And I want to focus on the first definition is your company going to be around in 5 years, 20 years? And Chuck, we discussed this a little bit. Tell me your opinion on sustainable business models and how it applies to your company.
Well, the application to us, and again, there's a bigger energy discussion and subsidies for energy and all that we can have at a later time. But the challenge for us is that when you talk about the developing world, there's a lot of grant dollars that go in from an NGO or a government development perspective. And we've seen in our world where companies have gone in and taken those grant dollars. So there's a wonderful company called TiE, which is Lights for India, just because of the TiE heritage, I'll use that as an example. And they would get a grant from a government agency, whether it be the World Bank or whether it be the Gates Foundation, open an office. That grant money would run out, and then they'd have to close the office. They didn't have a sustainable business model. One of the things we're trying to do as a company in the developing world is make sure that the markets and the segments that we're going after can actually afford the products. So we're not giving them away, we're not donating them. Now we do have some special light programs that are going into schools and things like that, but we're working really hard. Now you have to be patient, and it's very painful at times from a cost perspective, but we're working really hard to not take government subsidies, not take development subsidies, to go in and make sure that the markets and the segments that we're going after can actually afford the product so we can have a sustainable model. And that's happened in the developing world a lot, where people go in, I'm going to do this, and they build a house, and then they decide they're going to come back, and the money runs out, and then you've got one house sitting there, and in a whole village. So we looked at the market, we looked at the competitive set in the market, some of the things that people have been trying to do through the years to help these off-grid the off-grid environments, and made a conscious decision that this was going to be a sustainable business model. So we've said no to grants. We haven't chased that sort of money, and that's true if you're here on the energy side. Again, you go back to Solyndra, you go back to Fiskars, the government. You can't build a sustainable business if you're dependent on some sort of it's fake money, essentially, right? Because the market will never support you on that. So we looked at what the environment was, what people were trying to do in the environment, looked at our target segments and said, in order to make this sustainable, people have got to be able to afford it. So we've gone into we've left certain countries alone, left certain regions alone because they simply don't have the wherewithal to afford the products, and we've focused on others. So.
Now, Chuck, when you approach these NGOs and government authorities in these developing world countries, is it easy to get in the door? Do you have to do a lot of convincing?
You have to do a lot of convincing, but again, the challenge is that we wanted to understand what was going on in the market, but we didn't want their money. So, I've dealt with the UN Energy, World Bank, very senior people at these organizations, and there's a lot of really well-educated, really passionate people that are trying to help. The challenge is that without them creating sustainability, it's hit and miss, right? You get, churches are a wonderful example. So you get a church that wants to help a village, and they tie them together, and if they go every year, that's good. But there's an NGO that is very proud of the fact that they collect $50 million and help 600 coffee farmers in Ethiopia. Well, there's 6 million coffee farmers in Ethiopia. It just doesn't scale. So you can't, they're spending half their money on themselves and their environment, and they're helping 600 farmers of 6 million. So that's the problem that you get into when you start to work with governments. We can go back to energy policy, we can go back to being in California versus being in Missouri, But if you want to be a clean tech green company, you have to come up with a sustainable business model. You can't look for subsidies, you can't look for government help, or the market, just like we're talking about, the market acceptance. Will people pay? Will people pay a little bit of the premium? That's, you've got to get, in our view, you've got to get out of that, or you're going to look like a fad instead of a sustainable business. And then that's a problem with the investors as well, because if you're an investor and the business model you're investing on depends on government funds, good luck in raising money.
Michael, I see you nodding your head a lot. What are you thinking?
Absolutely. And I think as a startup company, the word sustainable means the definition is a bit different. I had to self-fund my company for the first 4 years. And believe me, that's the only part that is not sustainable. So fortunately, we now have a Series A closing. So that means we will have a bona fide future that we can buy machines, we can do a lot of things that we need to do to keep the business alive and moving forward and growing. But I totally agree with Chuck. If you walk into an investor presentation and say that you're relying on government subsidies, you'll get shot in the head. I mean, there's no way that's going to sell.
Excellent. Let me jump to Eddie and ask the same question. Eco-Reebox is really it's a real barrier to enter into this market. What's your sustainable business model look like? Or what are you doing to make sure it's sustainable?
Well, a big thing I talked about earlier was our patent that we're constantly working on. I mean, it's basically just a way to get those boxes back. And I didn't mention a key component as an incentive solution for customers to actually, bribe them to send the box back to us somehow, almost like a CRB. And in the future, like a California redemption value for when you're recycling cans. So we want to do the same thing with our box product, but instead of maybe cash, you can turn it into a coupon or marketing for the company that we're working with to sell the product. And that's, I don't believe selling plastic boxes is going to get us very far. Nobody in the company believes that, but there are other companies that do that. So we don't want to be in that manufacturing game. We don't really care to. We'd rather develop a way to be the solution for that supply chain.
Thank you, Eddie. Before I move on, I want to ask the audience a question. So what do you think is more important right now today with this economical or the economy the way it is, to be sustainable in the long term or sustainable as it relates to people, profit, and the planet? Anyone want to comment on that? No? Did you understand the question?
Yeah, we don't want to choose one.
No one wants to. No one wants to talk about what happened.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Okay, for us, all of our economics have been put together with a view of being price competitive with the oil industry in the absence of any subsidies. And so, in many ways, that kind of defines our philosophy for both of the hats that I've been wearing. We don't have a problem taking government money for non-dilutive funding in the early stages as a company, but when it comes to the big picture of the economics of production, it has to be price competitive with the oil industry without subsidies. And that really, from our perspective, is the only way forward.
Staying on that, we've mentioned investors. I think all of you looked for funding at some point in the recent past. Tell us what your biggest challenge was getting in the door, and what, besides, are we going to make money, what did those investors want to know or want to see? Michael.
Being a San Diego company, but using agricultural residues as a raw material is a bit of a challenge, because most investors here in San Diego are used to biotech or wireless, and that's what they know, that's what they focus on. So, whenever I've met with local investors, I spent 70% of my time educating and 30% of my time telling them how we're going to make money, and that's a horrible ratio. So, what I've learned is just to, go where you're most needed. So in the Midwest, when they have an abundance of these crops, and there's a big push for creating rural jobs, we just found the perfect match.
So you're investors from the Midwest, not from the region?
Right.
Okay.
We found the same thing. There's two comments. First of all, relative, like Michael, the company, we've gone to getting aligned investors in country. So got Uganda and Kenya. We're working with some people right now in India where because again, knowing the local culture, knowing the local business environment, and you want alignment there. So that's what we've done is we've got, our initial funding came from Southern California, and then the follow-on funding comes from the markets we want to do business in. So strategically, we made that decision about, 8 months ago or so. But the other issue that you have in clean tech right now, as a general statement, is because of the bad press. There's two parts. It's the bad press with Solyndra, I'll go back to that. But more importantly, there hasn't been any big exits for clean tech. So, there's been no Googles, there's nothing out there so far. So there's been a lot of money in the last 5 to 7 years that have gone in, globally gone into clean tech. And there's been some acquisitions in that. I think, 2010, there was $260 billion invested in clean tech. About 40 billion of that was corporate acquisitions, but there hasn't been any big exits. So that pipeline is starting to dry up. I've seen that in general. Again, that's a general statement. So when you go in and pitch it as a clean, it doesn't have the sizzle it once did. Now, if you have a specific solution that solves some problems, that's how you have to go in. The door doesn't swing open nearly as quickly or easily as it did 3 or 4 years ago when you go in as a clean tech company. And primarily because people have not made a lot of money on clean tech so far.
So, Nigel, I know you have some candid answers to this question. Why don't you give us a couple?
No swearing, please.
Yeah, no swearing.
Oh, okay.
Maybe some UK-isms, but no swearing.
Yeah, I think all aspects of funding in the US have been a challenge over the last few years, as you all know. On the government fronts, some of the places that we've gone to get money and not got money, by the way, like the Department of Energy, USDA. The Department of Energy in their ARPA-E program have funded some strange things. And so you might think that a project to convert that produces oil from yeast is something that they would be interested in, because a 2-year time frame to commercial production. Well, they're not. What was remarkable was that out of I think we'd done 8 or 9 grant proposals for the DOE over the last few years. And what was remarkable was that the one project that they really were interested in, from my perspective, was absolutely out there in a black box. First of all, it was called photosynthesis in the dark. Right? So, as you all know, photosynthesis requires light. Now, you're all laughing at this. I mean, the science behind it was actually pretty interesting. And it connected back to my days in Arena Pharmaceuticals, where I worked on G protein coupled receptors, and some of you guys may know a bit about that. But it was all based on a strain of bacteria, the archaebacteria, that use a molecule called bacteria rhodopsin instead of chlorophyll to affect photosynthesis. And so I put this project together that you could actually modify bacteria rhodopsin and get it to do photosynthesis without light. And the energy would come from the thermal surroundings of a stretch of water or something, right? So they were really interested in this project. And from my perspective, it was a total long shot. It was 30 years away from commercial viability, and yet that was the closest that we got to actually getting any money out of them. And so that tells you that the Department of Energy, somehow, some of their programs are just weird. And then to make another comment about the Department of Energy, when the ARPA-E program first came out, if you looked at who they funded in the first rounds, and ARPA-E, by the way, was set up to promote startup companies to help entrepreneurs. So you look who they funded in the first round. Remarkably, it was General Motors for a new diesel engine. It was United Technologies for some jet engine that burned renewable fuels. It was DuPont for a process that, interesting stuff, of course, but not exactly your typical startup entrepreneur-run company.
Thanks, Nigel. My numbers, when I was doing some research for 2011, there was...
Before you get off that,
Sure.
Nigel's comments now, is November elections going to make that even worse?
Okay, well, let's jump to that question. I don't know, what do you think?
Well, that depends who gets elected, of course.
Well, no, you...
But that's back to the investor. Again, an investor is like, they want visibility, they want some sort of, plan that they have confidence in, and if November elections are going to, skew everything, that's back to, as a startup trying to raise money, makes it for an incredibly difficult environment.
Just...
Yeah, if you're trying to raise money right now, I would suggest you wait until the election's over.
Just as a kind of survey question, has anything really moved in the last couple of years with who we have as president now? And I'm thinking people are afraid if we get a Republican in, nothing's going to happen. So I don't know, has something happened in the last couple of years? Will something happen in the next couple of years if we get a change?
Could I comment on that? I actually don't. I don't think it.
Let Eddie say something.
I don't think it really matters who gets elected in the election. I think you've got a boatload of people who've got a boatload of money, and the places where people with money can make money are getting fewer and far between. And so the stock market's high, so you're not going to make much money on the stock market. Can't make money in the bank because interest rates are 0.3% or something. There are lots of other places where it's become more and more difficult to make money. Therefore, whatever happens after the election, whoever gets in, you're going to see an increase of flow of money into more risky ventures. In fact, there might even be so much of that money that there aren't enough companies to go around to take it.
Before I move on to David, I just want to mention in 2011, depending on the source, there was somewhere between $4.3 and $4.9 billion invested, and somewhere around 320 to almost 400 companies. Who's getting funded? I mean, that's a lot of money for not so many companies. And before we answer that, David had a question.
Yeah, I can tell from Nigel's comments that he's older than me when he talked about the 1973 Arab oil embargo. But all we need
I was two, David.
Patrick can comment
David
on this more. Patrick can comment on this too, but all we need is a few guerrillas out of Yemen going into southern Saudi Arabia, blowing up a few oil pipelines, or a few Silkworm missiles from Iran, blowing up a few oil tankers in the Straits of Hormuz, and suddenly all of you guys will be rich, because oil will be $130 to $150 a barrel minimum. This kind of black swan event will really transform this whole field and make you all famous, and like visionaries.
Well,
that's really what this panel discussion should address too,
I really want to add a comment here from my oil background.
Not wishing to be the devil's advocate, we did have a couple of black swan events recently, like the BP thing in the Gulf, and the change of power in Egypt and Tunisia and Libya.
Egypt doesn't produce oil.
Well, Libya does, and it actually had no effect whatsoever on funding of clean tech companies. No effect whatsoever.
Let's get back to the green and clean. But before we do, I want to make one comment. I grew up in West Texas, right on the border of Texas and New Mexico. And that's where West Texas Intermediate is produced. West Texas Intermediate is the index for all crudes. And because the price of oil right now, or crude, is above $100, there's so much activity, drilling, going after the natural gas. And for the last 20 years, it's just been a horrible recession because the price of crude has been so low, but now the price of crude is high. If I went in there and tried to talk about alternative or renewable energies to anyone, I get shot. And this is Texas, and they carry guns. So you don't have bumper stickers that say, I have solar panels on my house. I just came back a week ago, and it was incredible, the amount of drilling rigs. And it's the plains are just flat as long as you can see. You can see drilling rigs going after every single last drop of oil because it's over $100 a barrel. And that's the problem we have, is the companies want to make money, and they can make money, but we need these renewable and alternative energies so we don't use all that petroleum. Comments from the audience or questions?
I don't think you're hurting enough here in the States. I mean, where I'm from in Australia, we pay over $6 a gallon for fuel. Wow. So, you guys aren't hurting enough. That's all I'm going to say about the United States. It is too cheap. Your resources, your water, everything is too cheap here. Until you start to hurt, you won't change.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. I want to get back to my previous question about where's the money going? Who are those companies? Are they late-stage companies getting $4 million or $40 million, $400 million? Who's getting that money and how?
It's not us.
Anyone? Anyone on the panel? Nigel, Chuck?
Well, we talked about Solyndra, of course. I mean, the Solyndra story was, I think, a $600 million loan guarantee, which was matched by investors.
Those are VCs. That $4.3 million, those are VC money, not government money. Where's that money going? Any ideas? I don't know.
I think lion's share is going into clean energy. There are very few solar panel companies that are actually profitable. There's a lot of money going into this clean energy craze and not a whole lot coming out. As I was saying earlier, there are other clean technologies that are fundable that will create green jobs. Not just being self-serving here, but we're not seeing any of it. Unless you're in that area that's the sexy investment sector, you're going to have to rely on other sources.
And they are going to bigger companies with bigger, you talked about scale, I think, earlier. But it's going, trying to do big wind farms, trying to do geothermal, trying to do
commercial scale.
That's where most of the investments fall on. And that adds up pretty quick. But that's a lot of those dollars have gone into that sort of enterprise, bigger enterprise type utility scale investment.
So are investors just looking for a less risky investment? Is that it? Late stage investments, commercial stage. Is that really the trend right now?
It's waned because, again, I sat on the panel last week and there was a guy that had raised about $180 million. He's trying to build power plants. And, we're just looking for a couple of $1 million to light up Africa and India. So, that's the difference between, utility scale in North America and what people are trying to do elsewhere around the world.
Going back to Solyndra, I hate to go back to it, but that wasn't just government money. The DOE loan, when you get a loan guarantee from the DOE, you actually have to match it with private money. And so the Solyndra story that some of you may have thought was 600 million is actually over $1 billion, just down the drain completely.
Question?
Well, it was a comment about what you're asking, and maybe you studied it and can corroborate this, I don't know. But I think the highest level of funding in the highest category has been clean tech recently. And when I looked under the hood on that a little bit, clean tech is almost a replacement for energy.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, it's like you don't have energy investment anymore. It's clean tech, because everything in energy seems to be getting a green label, even if it's, you know, hydrofracking or something. Yeah, you know, gas is the next green fuel, right? And so I don't know what the numbers mean when you have that kind of logic behind it.
You're right, though.
You're right. Yeah.
That's what we're talking about, this industrials, where the utility scale.
It's not green, it's not sustainability, it's all these.
No, absolutely.
It's a new label.
I mean, you got the whole of the world of coal that's rebranded itself as clean coal, right? Which you know, is a good thing to clean up the coal world, of course, but it's not renewable or sustainable. But now it's called clean energy.
Sustainable mining.
And that's why I've started using renewable alternative energy kind of in the same sentence, because that's what it is. You have renewable energy, solar, wind. You have alternative energy, which is fuel cells with natural gas or whatever.
Don't forget dolphin safe.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Yeah.
So I just by way of kind of the political and macroeconomic discussion we've been having, do you guys feel that the primary impediment to scaling or adoption or, you know, whatever the business problems are that you're facing as an industry on a broad basis are more related to you know, government well, I don't know how to say it other than like crony capitalism. Is it like big people like the DuPonts of the world who are standing in the way and sucking up resources and practicing regulatory arbitrage and doing these sorts of things that are impeding dollars from trickling down to the investments that need to be made? Or is it more an issue of the cost curve not being in the right place relative to the price of oil in the world today and other you know, energy sources that would be you know, 4 years down the line would be, you guys would probably be looking at a more equal playing field once the realization that we've passed the peak on, you know, easily tappable oil is come and gone?
I think you know, part of the issue that we face in energy, for example, is that the world of people who finance plant construction, large-scale industrial construction, is totally different from the world of entrepreneurs and VC-type investors that you start off with. And so in the world of project finance, you've got some extremely conservative financial people. And if you go to them and you say, hey, I've got something interesting going on, I need $200 million to build a plant. First thing that they say to you is, well, okay, how many plants are doing this process around the world? 5, 10? You know, if there are 10 plants out there, then we can understand the economics of the process, and then we'll understand exactly where we stand, and then we might give you the money. Well, if you're doing something new, then that doesn't exist. And so you're already in a kind of catch-22 situation. And the other thing is that the project finance guys will want guarantees on their money. And so typically they want to own a big chunk of your company. Well, you've got these other guys on the other side who also want to own a big chunk of your company, but they're not going to give it to these other guys over here. So you have a complete, you know...
Mexican standoff.
Exactly. Thank you, David. And I think that you know, that really is a fundamental problem in this, particularly in the biofuel renewable chemical part of the world, because you're dealing with this Mexican standoff, and there aren't really good solutions to that.
Well said.
But I think you're and Nigel talked about it. You've got these large companies that are commanding a lot of that government attention. They're commanding a lot of those dollars, and they're not trickling down to solutions. That takes the private sector because of the appetite for the investment risk, right? And that whole VC community has shrunk over the last 10 years. So there's very little VC money out there right now. That's a big part of the challenge. Is, I mean, you can't, there's a handful of VC companies left in Southern California overall, and the ones that are in Northern California, they're billion-dollar funds. They're acting like private equity guys, not like venture capitalists.
Right.
So that's true for everybody, not just clean tech.
Right.
That asset class, that typical VC asset class, is almost gone now.
Right.
It's a private equity play now, and they're much different risk quotient on the investing side.
In terms of opportunities, how do you see the regulatory market? We touched a little bit about the next president, but as far as California and even federally, what's your feeling as far as where the regulations are going to go? Is it going to help? Is it going to hurt? Michael?
Well, for us, I'm not sure about the energy, but for what I'm doing, they've only helped. As I mentioned earlier, AB 32, it's calling for a dramatic reduction in formaldehyde release from wood-based products. The same type of thing is going to be nationwide next year. And from that point, there's just this rising consumer demand also for cleaner technologies. But those are the only regulations that are really pertinent to our situation right now.
Now, did you or your company have anything to do, or were you involved in those regulations and getting them passed, or were they just already in the pipeline and you kind of got lucky?
It's just a happy coincidence.
Excellent. We
We'll
like
take
that. Now, Eddie, any regulatory issues or hurdles?
I don't think there's anything that regulates shipping packages. I think the only thing that really regulates them are the companies that do the shipping, like the post office, the UPS, FedEx. They all have their standards for the type of product being used, but nothing, maybe agricultural stuff like the cold packs that have to be used for food or for medicines. And I hope someday, I mean, like pretty soon, there should be some sort of regulation for waste management of the shipping products.
Excellent. Well, Chuck and Nigel, you're really working offshore, so any comments as far as regulations beyond the U.S.?
Well, I think, most countries have regulations and rules. China has more regulations and rules than the U.S. in many places. It doesn't mean that people follow them, of course. I think the percentage of people who follow the rules in the U.S. is significantly greater than China. But China is a country that has rules and regulations across the board for everything, and some of them are relevant to, as I mentioned earlier, the one that we're interested in is this mandate to blend ethanol with gasoline that provides a business opportunity. So I think rules and regulations that come into force everywhere can provide business opportunities for the clean tech sector.
Yeah, I would just make a kind of come at it from a different perspective. For our business specifically, I don't see it, but going back to talking about regulations, I mean, taking it back into the political realm, and we talked about the November elections. I think either party, I think that clean tech and green are vibrant and going to be here for a long time, because if one party is going to look at trying to reduce dependence on foreign energy, the other party is going to have a platform around green jobs. So either way you look at it, I think that there's going to continue to be a focus on clean tech, green tech, domestic jobs, domestic opportunities, exporting, you know, whether it's patentable things, you know, globally. And so I think it's, you know, we talk a little bit about some of the challenges up here, and that's part of what the panel was about. But it is a vibrant environment, and there will continue to be a focus on this for me into the foreseeable future.
Excellent. Well, we're right at 8:45, so I think I should wrap up. I want to thank our panelists. Thank you, everyone, for the excellent answers, and thank you, audience, for the comments and questions. And I'll turn it back over to Patrick.
Thank you to the panelists. Thank you very much, Holly, for moderating. And y'all, if you would, take home the flyers for next event. Hope to see you there. Monday the 30th is that event in Orange County with a counterpart in Orange County, kind of half of our chapter. Encourage you to visit our website to get more details about that. And once again, thank you very much.